Hi, Chris. Welcome to the Beyond the Tools podcast.
Hey, Crystal, thanks for having me.
I am very excited to dig in here. I know we've got a lot to talk about. And yeah, we got connected through HREI, and specifically, I met Sunny at the CMPX conference just a couple months ago. So I'm really glad we get to do this.
Yeah, it's awesome, and I'm looking forward to it as well.
So, Chris, you've been in this industry a long time, but I love hearing the origin story. So, how did you get involved in the trades?
Nepotism mostly. I'm not gonna lie. No, I'm a three and a half generation sheet metal worker, is what I like to say. Gas technician and HVAC designer. So, my grandfather was a sheet metal worker. Worked in the Toronto area for many many years, and then my father got into it. My stepmother's also a licensed sheet metal worker and HVAC designer, and she's actually who got me into HVAC design. And so I've been doing it since I was knee high to a grasshopper, as they say. Or do they say that anymore? I don't know, but been doing it a long time. I wouldn't tell the ministry this, but on weekends visiting my dad before I was of age of majority and supposed to be, I was on site with him, nailing boots and doing all sorts of things. And I saw the trade from a different perspective. Because my father started his own business, and so I got to see it from sort of the install side and the management side, and that really got me into learning a lot more about the trade. And then when I went to school for the industry, I really found that I loved learning about it, and more importantly, loved teaching it. When I was in trade school, I found that my brothers and sisters, beside me in class, they really struggled with some of the concepts that tended to come naturally to me. And so, what started as um, beer and wings before a test tutoring, I would get together with, we'd get together for study sessions at a local pub, turned into me, tutoring one or two people, and then it actually turned into me commandeering a classroom in the school before tests and exams and things like that. That I was actually with almost the entire class tutoring them, just as a peer, right? I wasn't getting paid for anything like that. I just wanted to help and make sure that everybody was understanding and going over the day's notes, things like that. Um, Apparently that got noticed. And a couple of years after I got my license, the director of that school gave me a call and said, we have an instructor actually going out east. They were going out your way, not quite as far, but out your way, and they wanted me to come in and apply for the job. And so I went in and applied for the job, and became a full time instructor in the HVAC industry. I was teaching the sheet metal trade, health and safety, things like that. And then a few years after I started teaching, a job came up at a school in Toronto as director of training, and I took that on, and that was more of administration and teaching. It's kind of like being the principal of the school, where I developed curriculum, worked with governments. Uh, you know, uh, Edited the Red Seal exam a few times, rewrote the curriculum, the Ontario curriculum with the College of Trades at the time, and was doing things like that, managing instructors and classes, and I think we had about 500 apprentices under the roster at that time that I was managing. Their way through the apprenticeship program. We were doing gas technician training, sheet metal training, health and safety training. And we even brought in HRI training near the end of my tenure there. Um, when COVID hit, things changed a little bit in the industry with the teaching, of course, and I thought it was a perfect opportunity for me to switch gears. And so what I did was I took my business full time. I'd had a business, the entire time, but I was only doing it part time. And so Took the business full time, moved out to southwestern Ontario, where I am right now, Brantford, Ontario, and have been running that ever since. When I took my business full time, I also decided to become a HRI member, because any reputable HVAC company in Canada is typically an HRI member, and I
Mhm.
worked very closely with HRI as my in my roles, and had all the training already, and sent my instructors to take their training. And so I had called up HRI to become a member, and spoke to the woman. Unfortunately, she's retired now and will be sorely missed, Angie Mante. She was an amazing part of HRI. But I called her up just to say hello, and to become a member. And she ended up saying, "Oh my goodness, Chris, it's so good to hear you. We were actually looking for your contact details, because we just had an instructor retire, and we wanted to know if you'd come and teach some courses for us." And I thought, you know, I miss the teaching. I thought I could do it, a couple classes a year for them, or whatever that, whatever they needed. And I would love to do that. And so I said yes. And that quickly went from one or two classes to many, many classes throughout the year. And it's taken up a lot of my time. And I've been working on government projects with them, like the heat pump gap analysis. I do talks for them across the country as well, with different groups. And it's been a really, really great opportunity, and great time working with them, as well as running my business on the side, not on the side as well.
Yeah.
Keeps me very busy. But one of the things I did notice while working at Atria is, there are a lot of people looking for better tools
Mm,
for HVAC. Their HVAC needs, I guess, and
yeah.
one things is HVAC sizing. And so I've been doing HVAC sizing for a long time. So heat loss and gain calculations, duct sizing, ventilation designs, radiant hydronic designs, things like that. I've been doing them for a long time. And I'm a Mac user. Sorry for any Windows users out there, but I've always been a Mac. And unfortunately, the tools that are out there right now, they don't work on Mac computers. And so
Mm,
I had to create my own tool. And once I started realizing that there's a lot of people out there that are lacking a good tool, an intuitive tool, an easy tool to use to size HVAC systems properly, I actually commercialized my tool, and I turned it into a an app. And so now, on top of my teaching and my HVAC company, I have also now started TrueCalc, which is the HVAC sizing app that I have available on the App Store and Google Play, which does heat load gain calculations within minutes using augmented reality. So that's that's been my 30 years in the industry in a nutshell. A
yeah.
very big nutshell, but still, that's a little bit about me and my origin. And
Amazing.
that's kind of how we came to meet each other, through CMPX, when we did our launch at TrueCalc in 2026.
Yes, yeah, yeah. And we're definitely gonna dive deep into all the calculation side of things and what's going on there. But yeah, obviously you've worn a lot of hats and continue to wear a lot of hats as contractor, educator, trainer, software founder. What role do you think has taught you the most about the industry?
Well, that's a good question. It has to be a little bit between um, all of them. So, as an HVAC designer, which is primarily what I do these days through my company, I've got techs that go out and do work in the field. But for me myself, I do mostly HVAC designs and duct designs. Um, what I've found is the best designers that I've ever worked with or for have always had that boots on the ground experience. They're coming from a place where they were installing this stuff, or at least they spent time on the construction site, realizing how a house is built, realizing where things go, what plumbing might get in the way, or what electrical light might get in the way, like where a light switch can has to go, a pipe for an HVAC system may not be able to go right. And so, same thing with a toilet flange or something like that. And so these are very important things to know. And so I think really my sort of experience throughout different facets of the trade has taught me probably an equal amount for every single, um, um, or for what people are looking for and needing in the industry. That said, you learn a lot. You learn a lot from teaching, and as much experience I have in the industry, I don't have it all, and I'll be the first to admit that. And I would never, bullshit anybody. Oh, can I say that on? Sorry.
You can you can curse your little heart out.
Okay. I would never bullshit anybody. I always tell them, if I don't know something, we'll find the answer, right? And so with teaching, you find there's a lot of things that you don't know that that other people do, right? Because the industry is so vast, and that's one of my favorite things about teaching with HRI is their cross Canada courses. And so in almost every one of my classes, I have somebody from BC, coast to coast, right? From BC right to the East Coast, where you are. And we learn so much about the Canadian industry from each other, and different colloquial terms that pop up, and it just makes you a much more well-rounded industry professional. But then the networking that happens there as well is amazing, right? Like the people are meeting from coast to coast and then creating these relationships with one another, and can that can build into new branches opening up in different provinces, or people moving from one province to another and having connections there to start new jobs. So it's not just training, that HRI is doing. They're networking the entire industry, and that's one of the things I love about HRI and the training in general is learning from all those people, learning from my students, and hopefully they're getting the same same amount of learning or more out of me. But but I really like it for that reason. So I would say teaching has probably taught me the most. But your experience on the ground is really, really important, and what you go through is really, really important. So
Yeah, and I love that you have such a comprehensive view of the industry because of all the different roles that you take on within it. So I'm excited to dig a little more into that, and specifically some of the sizing issues that you've encountered, and how you see that manifest. So tell us a little bit about some of the real world problems that contractors face or that they create when equipment isn't sized properly. Like, how big of a problem is this?
well, I mean, I don't know of any houses burning down. It's probably happened, but that might not be from sizing, but more from the bigger problem is unqualified people doing the installations. That is a huge problem in our industry. We call them tailgate warranties. People that have come out and they overpromise, underdeliver, and they've given the cheapest possible price, which is enticing to a good majority of the population. But they're installing something inferior, or worse, incorrectly, and that can be very, very bad for the customer, and could potentially be hazardous to their health and to their homes. Right, so that's a huge problem. When it comes to many contractors, though, even reputable contractors, sizing has long been a thorn in their side. Because, as I mentioned earlier, every tool that's available on the market today is a Windows desktop based tool. And even though heat loss and gain calculations are mandatory for equipment selection and swaps, according to the CSF 280, which is our national standard for sizing these things and is referenced in all code books, sizing calculation should be done every single equipment swap that is being done out there for new construction, retrofit construction, everything. But it takes a long time to learn those tools. Right? We have to take a course for heat loss and gain calculations, which everybody should take, and I'm a huge advocate of that course. But then on top of that, if you want to learn a piece of software, you have to purchase it, which comes as a yearly subscription and in the thousands of dollars. Then there is a huge learning curve that goes on top of that. And probably one of the worst things is you have to actually go out to the job site, today's competitive marketplace, you have to go to a job site. Somebody's called you in to get a quote, and they're looking for a quote like this, right? They want it now so they can make that decision. And if you don't give that to them now, they're turning around and going to the next contractor that will give them that quote immediately. And so contractors have a really hard time going out to a job site and saying, okay, well, I have to spend a couple hours here taking measurements with my tape measure. And then I have to go back to my office and I have to put all these dimensions into my software. And then I have to actually, select all of your different requirements for your house. So I should have you, a quote in a week's time,
Yeah.
because they've got 5 different calls to go to that day, and then they've got to send back to the office so the process just doesn't work, and it hasn't worked. And so contractors, and I don't blame them, contractors just don't do it. They go
Yeah.
out there and they stick their thumb out and they say, oh, it looks like about a 50,000 BTU furnace, that's what we're going to put in. Or it looks like about 2,000 square foot air conditioner, that's what we're going to put in. The problem is those rules of thumb don't actually work, and what they do is they promote short cycling, undersized equipment, more often than not oversized equipment. And
Mm.
people think bigger is better, right? That's a big problem in our industry, is people think bigger is better. But on top of that, they use it as a safety factor. They look at a piece of equipment that's already installed, and maybe they're not doing the thumbs up rule of thumb. Maybe they're actually swapping like for like, and so they're going in there and they're seeing a 2-ton air conditioner and they're saying, okay, I'm going to put in a 2-ton air conditioner. Or they see a 2-ton air conditioner and they're hearing the customer say, yeah, but my upstairs room is actually really hot in the summertime, and so they put in a 3-ton air conditioner instead. And now we have this problem where we're not just swapping like for like, we're upsizing as a safety factor because we think bigger is going to be better. And that's not how these pieces of equipment work. Equipment is not plug and play. There's thousands of different settings that can be done on different pieces of equipment to move airflow properly. There's different commissioning that should be done after an install to make sure airflow is moving properly. But again, all of this takes time and effort and proper training to do, and so contractors are typically avoiding this step and swapping the like for like, and it becomes a burden on them because then they're sort of stressing, did I size this right, did I not size this right, am I going to get these customer callbacks, am I going to have warranty issues, and so this is one of the catalysts that made me realize TrueCalc was a very important tool in the industry, because a contractor can now go out on site and within the same call, within 30 minutes, have a CSA compliant heat loss and gain calculation done for every single job they're going to tell the customer with a certified report exactly how big a piece of equipment needs to be to go into their home, and different settings that need to be applied to that piece of equipment to make sure that the airflow um, is moving where it should be, and actually doing what it's supposed to do according to the CSA F280. And so that's a long-winded answer again about the industry and some of the problems, but we can't keep on swapping like for like. And we can't keep on upsizing because the last person did the same thing. And so now you've got a 2-ton air conditioner, which was probably supposed to be a ton and a half. And now somebody's putting in a 3-ton air conditioner, and we just keep on getting bigger and bigger. And short cycling of equipment, especially cooling equipment, has serious side effects for humidity problems, comfort issues, and structural problems based on those humidity issues. And it's something that we really need to avoid. And so proper sizing is incredibly important. And again, was the catalyst for for me creating TrueCalc, to give a contractor an easy, mobile friendly piece of equipment, or software, I should say. It's not a piece of equipment, it's a piece of software, where they can actually go out and they use their phone and they literally just scan the house with their phone, and it gives them a load calculation that is needed.
Incredible. And I mean, yeah, as you're talking about this, I mean, the challenges there and the consequences of not doing the proper sizing are very, very obvious. And it's kind of incredible that something didn't already exist But I love that you recognize this and you're obviously not seeing the challenges not only in your company and the direct work that you're doing, but also in all the apprentices and all the training that you do.
I will be the first to admit there is one other piece of software out there that does similar to what TrueCalc does, but TrueCalc is the actual only mobile only
Yeah.
application. You don't need a desktop computer to go to it, so you do everything from your phone, and so you essentially have the ability to scan the entire house within 30 minutes. You can provide a quote to a person on site. You never have to go back to the office to do anything, and you're also able to do new construction as well. So you can actually upload a PDF or an image of your floor plan and trace it, and it does the same thing for load calculation,
Yeah.
as well as a roadmap to many things in the future.
Excellent. Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I'd love to explore that a little further. I mean, as you talked about there, consumers are getting more educated. They have access to more resources. They're also, I would say, more concerned about being ripped off or getting, going with the wrong company. So they end up collecting multiple quotes and seeing multiple companies. So tell me a little bit more about how you're seeing expectations change and how you've seen being able to provide these sorts of calculations. How does that help contractors to stand out?
So um, it really is dependent, because I mean the industry is split up, or I should say the community is split up into parts. Some people want the best price or the cheapest price. Some people want the best equipment. They don't mind about the cost, and some people are somewhere right down the middle. And so, it's a struggle that all contractors have. And so, something uh, something that can help, that offsets maybe if you're not the cheapest price or the least expensive price, is customer added value. And so that's how I utilize my expertise in the industry, is when I'm going on site. I did 4 calls yesterday, and all of them, of course, were for air conditioners. People talk about air conditioners. They're not 100% sure. Like the first call that I went on yesterday, the woman, it was actually a rental property. The landlord called me, but I met with the tenant, and the tenant had no idea what the difference between air conditioning and central air conditioning was. She was told that she should have air conditioning, and she said, I don't know what air conditioning is. I've always had central air conditioning. And so there was, so customer education is so important, because they just don't know, they just don't understand. It's something that we take for granted in the industry, the things that we've learned along the way. It would be like us talking to a doctor or something, and them going into textbook PhD doctrines or something like that we have no idea what they're talking about. And because we're just not in that industry, we have to put it in layman's terms and really explain things. And I think it's one of the things that's missing most in the industry, is the customer education. And it's not necessarily a fault of the contractors, because again, they're just trying to get the job, and they've got 5 other calls to get to that day. And so it's hard to spend the time with each customer. But I do find myself, right, who primarily does the sales and the HVAC designs. I leave all the installs to the techs. That me spending a little extra time with the customer and educating them on stuff, it really goes a long way. Even 10 or 15 minutes of just sitting down and explaining things to them goes a long way. I had one a couple weeks ago where it was an individual out in the country, and they called me up and they said, hey, I've got this issue. Somebody put a heat pump in, which we didn't even talk about heat pumps yet. And that's sizing for a heat pump is completely different and very important, but we can talk about that in a little bit. But they called me and said, somebody put this heat pump in my house and it's just not performing. And, they were sold a heat pump that had a temperature that would work down to -20 or something like that. Well, that looks amazing on a brochure, right? To a customer, oh, this works to -20. I'll never need my furnace again. Um, the problem is they don't explain that that works down to -20, but may only give you 20% of your heating load at -20. It's not giving you 100% of your heating load. So this person put in an old farmhouse, and they didn't do a heat loss and gain calculation or anything like that. They just came in and they said, "Here's a heat pump." They sized it off the furnace that was actually installed in the house. They put in a heat pump. It was severely undersized for the heating system, specifically because it worked to -20, but only provided about 20% of the heat at -20. And so it could never actually perform. And so they ended up having to use their wood stove this entire this last winter because the heat pump just did not work at all. And they weren't prepared to do this. As an older individual, they're retired. They don't, the whole reason they put the heat pump in is so they didn't want to actually, get the wood and have to move the wood in, and they wanted to make their life easier. But whoever the contractor was that went in there, they put this in, and this may not be the contractor's fault. This may be um, a knowledge based thing, right? Because a contractor is also looking at a -20 and saying, oh, this one goes to -20, perfect. And so, we have to be careful with what is sent out to us as marketing materials and what is actually, the specs for the equipment in reality, because they're two totally different things. And so we need to not only educate our contractors better. They can do that through HRI training and things like the heat pump gap analysis training that's at least going to be provided in Ontario and some other provinces across the country coming up. Teaches you a lot, but through education, through manufacturers as well, they have great resources through manufacturers to teach how these heat pumps actually work, and when they'll work and when they won't work, most specifically, and how we can actually have a heat pump that will work almost to the coldest temperature, but may need a backup. Depending on where we are in the country. And that knowledge just is not widespread. And through my education, I realized that there's a lot of people that really don't have that background knowledge. And so they're taking their limited scope on these heat pumps, which are, very quickly becoming the prominent device for heating and cooling in our country, taking their limited knowledge on heat pumps, and they're giving that to the customer, and the customer's like, wow, this is a magic bullet and I can do whatever I want with it. But then we have these customer complaints now where they're calling me and saying, we can't get the heat that we want. So this customer called me up and asked me, what my suggestion was. And I said, you need a heat loss and gain calculation. It's a requirement. You have to do this. And so every single one of my jobs, every single swap, every single everything comes with a heat loss and gain calculation. It's a value add-on. And what I'll often tell to people is, listen, I don't need to quote you on a job right now. What you need first is a heat loss and gain calculation. Let me come in, do the heat loss and gain calculation for you. I can quote you on the job at the same time. That's not a problem. But what you do is you pay me to do the heat loss and gain calculation. It's a simple per square foot price. They'll hire me to do the heat loss and gain calculation. And I say, now you've got a certified report that says exactly what your system needs to be and how big it needs to be. I can provide you a quote for that and the install for that, no problem. But you also have the ability now to go to whatever contractors you want and say, here's my report certified. This is what I need in my house. Quote me on this. And now they're getting an apples to apples quote, as opposed to, somebody coming in and quoting a 2 ton, and then somebody else coming in and quoting a 3 ton, and somebody else coming in and saying, oh, you only need 1.5 tons, or we're going to, heat pumps don't work. Let's do this instead, and it's, this is the issue. And so, so this is what I do with many of my customers, and it often works, right? I do heat loss and gain calculations on a regular basis on site, where sometimes I get the install job, sometimes I don't. I'm still getting some revenue because I'm doing the heat loss and gain calculation, which is great. But they have the ability then to then get an apples to apples quote, and they feel more confident in their decision making because of that. Then they feel more empowered, and if you can
Yeah.
empower the customer, then you're more likely to win that job as well. If you can educate them without making them feel stupid, we don't, it's a delicate balance. Sometimes it is, but we don't. You know, we don't want to lose the customer in that regard. But if we can educate them, then you're typically going to win a customer for life, right? And I'm not the kind of individual that goes out and oversells things. And somebody will say, they'll ask me to come in and quote them on a heat pump or something like that, because that, it's the big buzzword right now is the heat pump, and I'm a huge proponent of heat pumps. I just want to say that, but I don't think that they're right for every single home, especially for 100% of heating. It can't always work in Canada. um, and so sometimes I'll go out there and do a job, and it's an old farmhouse like this one, and I'll say, a heat pump is great and it'll cover a bunch of your load, no problem. But you may still require a backup because you're living in an older house, right? And you need to do X, Y, and Z in order to upgrade your house to make a heat pump work as 100% heating and cooling source. Um, and Sometimes I'll talk myself out of a job because I'll say, if you just insulate your attic and if you just change your windows and spend your money on that right now, then you may end up being in a better position for a heat pump, that can actually cover more of your load, which will then pay you back in dividends in the long run. And so sometimes I talk myself out of a job because I'm like, oh, that's a good idea, Chris. Okay, you're not hired. I'm going to do the insulation and the and the windows instead. And I'm like, okay, no problem. But I can almost guarantee that when the time comes, that person's now calling me back and saying, hey, you're the guy that didn't oversell me or try to put something bigger in because my house wasn't ready for it. Now I'm ready for it, and I want that heat pump to work for me. Right? And
Yes.
it's again a way that I found works with customers to not only educate them, but to garner that trust with them, which is incredibly important as a contractor. We want that repeat business, and we want those 5-star reviews, right? And so,
Yes.
very important.
Yeah, and I mean, imagine the word of mouth that comes from an experience like that, where you're going in and giving them true advice and your expertise versus not doing the proper sizing, selling a piece of equipment that's not actually going to work for them, and then something that they're going to waste a lot of time and money on and have to redo. And the repercussions of that negative experience.
Well, yeah, and negative not just for the contract, but negative for the industry and negative for heat pumps. And that's a
Yeah.
huge problem when, Canada is trying to electrify, and heat pumps are so efficient and such an amazing source of heating and cooling that already exists, and, can help us, mitigate our reliance on fossil fuels and reach our climate goals. They're just so efficient and they work so well, and I believe that every house in Canada could have a heat pump. It may not be 100% heating from your heat pump, but every house in Canada, provided you have the power requirements, could potentially benefit from a heat pump. Um, but if they're not being sized or sold properly, now customers are saying, oh, these heat pumps are crap. They don't work. I don't, this is not what I want. I'm going back to a gas fired furnace. And, now we're taking a step back where we should be moving forward. And again, a lot of that comes down to improper education at the contractor level as well, right? Where people don't fully understand the technology. And I don't blame the contractors at all. This came on very, very quickly, very quickly. And there's a lot that people need to learn about it to understand, how to actually size these things properly. And so when we look at heat pumps, we have a heating and a cool equipment. It's a 2-for-1 piece of equipment, right? But there's different sizing requirements, whether you're talking about heating or whether you're talking about cooling. When we do a heat loss and gain calculations, according to the CSAF 280, we have to meet 100% of our heating requirement. 100% of our heating requirement. We cannot undersize a piece of equipment. Okay, which goes without to me, it goes without saying. It makes sense. We don't want to put in a furnace or a heat pump or whatever our heating appliance is that's going to provide less heat than we actually require, right? There's currently no upper echelon on how big a heating appliance can be, which again
Mm.
is another problem in my opinion. There used to be a rule where it could only be up to 40% bigger. That was taken out a few years back in the CSF 280. That's something that I think should be revisited, especially now with the efficient equipment that's out there and how it works. Um, but on the cooling side of things, which a heat pump also takes care of, there's different rules. A cooling appliance can only be as small as 80% of the calculated cooling load, up to 125% of the calculated cooling load. And this has to do with dehumidification or humidification issues and requirements, but also sizing availability at the time. And so I'll often do an exercise in my training sessions where we calculate a home and we see the load of the heating and the load of the cooling, and there's a stark difference. And the load for the heating is about 2.5 tons, 32,000 BTUs, and then the load for the heating is about 16,000 BTUs, close to a ton and a half. And what I asked the students is, what size, if you were to put in a single speed heat pump, what would the size of the heat pump be? And without a doubt, there's a lot of silence in the room, to be honest with you, because they're a little scared to say the wrong answer. But without a doubt, there's a handful of people in the room that will say, oh, 2.5 tons. That's the heating requirement. We got to put in 2.5 tons. And that's actually incorrect. In a system like that, with a single speed heat pump, we would have to size to the cooling load. And the cooling load dictates we can only be 80 to 125%. And 125% of 16,000 BTUs isn't even 2 tons of cooling. And so we wouldn't even be able to jump up to a 2 ton heat pump because the cooling requirement is only a ton and a half. So this becomes a teaching point on heat pumps specifically, because people often just think, well, we'll put in to cover the heating load. But now you're severely oversizing your cooling load, and you're going to have issues there with humidity. You're going to have issues with short cycling. You're going to have issues with comfort. Okay. And that's going to mean callbacks from customers, and callbacks cost money.
Yeah.
And now we're having issues with warranties where manufacturers are saying, you didn't do a heat loss and gain calculation, you didn't install this properly, we are not warranting this product. Right. And
Ooh.
so this is something that really needs to be talked about in the industry is, these things are very important. Heat pumps, for 100 years now or more, the gold standard has been a fuel fired appliance. And, we light a flame and it creates heat. Heat pumps don't create heat, they move it. Right? There's always heat in the air. And they use the refrigeration process to move that heat in winter and in summer. And because of that movement, the colder it gets outside, the less efficient that movement becomes, right? The harder it is to pull that heat out, the less heat there is to move. And so this sizing is incredibly important to make sure that we're actually moving the right amount of heat at the right time. And because it's a two-part system, heating and cooling, we have to make sure that both sides are still within that range of the CSF 280. And again, the only way to do that is through the education, whether that's through HVAC training, which again I highly recommend, or whether it's through manufacturers training, which there is lots available to you. And often for free, but that is incredibly important for sizing and preventing those callbacks and those warranty issues.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I I think this is huge. I've never really covered more of a technical topic on the show because what do I know? But you've made it seem like it's so easy to understand, and I think obviously there is such a big gap here in how things are done currently. So I know I'm passing this on to a bunch of, well, all of our clients who are not currently doing something like this. But I'm sure our listeners are really going to want to learn more and connect with you. So, what's the best way that they can do that?
So they can find me on the website at truecalc.io, www.truecalc.io if you're one of those www people. You can find me on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, again, all at TrueCalc. I think it's TrueCalc HVAC app. I can't remember the exact handles, but I think you'll put it in the show notes with
I
the
will.
with the what the links are there. But the best one is truecalc.io. You can go and take a look at the website, learn a little bit about me, about the app, and then you can book a demo. So we can actually I do demos every Wednesday around 10:30. Sorry, 10 to 11:30. They take about an hour and a half just to showcase the app. We can also do standalone demos as well. If you've got like a team or something, I do site visits for demos. But yeah, definitely reach out on the website, get in contact with us. Connect with me on LinkedIn. That's a great way for us to connect and share networks and things like that. But yeah, I really want to push proper sizing and really want, contractors to get out there and start doing the sizing the proper way. It's going to be huge for their sales force to get out there and have this this added bonus, a sales feature, for their customers where they get a real report. And more often than not, I am getting those. I'm getting paid to do the heat loss and gain calculation, and then I get paid to do the install as well. And I think what I missed actually was what I do is I take the cost of the heat loss and gain calculation off the end of the install, right? So
Mm,
pay me today for the HVAC sizing, but then if they hire me to do the job, that becomes part of my job, right? That becomes part of the quote. And so again, it's an extra bonus for them. And anybody can download TrueCalc today. It's available on the App Store. It's free to use. You can use it to your heart's content. You only pay per report for a summary report or a detailed report.
incredible. And yeah, we will absolutely put all those links in our show notes for anybody listening. Chris, I can't thank you enough for coming on the show and educating all of us, especially me, but all of us on this. I think it's so important. And yeah, obviously you guys are doing great things with TrueCalc, so I'm excited to see what the future holds for you.
Well, I thank you very much for having me. I know it's not the sexiest topic, but it's incredibly important for the industry, and definitely is something that can drive your customers to the next level in their careers or in their companies for sure.
Amazing. Thank you, Chris.
All right, thank you.